church, it is Bible study time, and we are in Judges, and we are at the part of Judges where you will imagine the characters and have an image of them finally in your face. That's right, we are talking Samson and Delilah today. I have posted on our church's website a picture that I took in Cleveland of a Samson Delilah painting, but there are tons of images of this part of our Bible. It is an interesting relationship, as we'll see, and many artists have been inspired over the years by it. So if you need some inspiration when hearing this text, go online and look up Samson and Delilah. If you remember, we talked about last week, Samson was born, and he was born a Nazarite. That meant that when he was in his mother's womb, she was not to have alcohol, she couldn't cut his hair when he was born, certain rules and regulations that would give him a sense of holiness, and also gave him abilities. We see this with only one other person who becomes a prophet. That's his blessing. For Samson, his blessing is strength. So with that in mind, at the end of our last reading, which was chapter 14 in Judges, we're going to jump into 15 and 16 today. At the end of chapter 14, we saw that Samson's wife had betrayed him, and so he didn't really want to be with her. And then we see right at the end that Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Now, if we stop like we did last week, we didn't know anything different. We thought, okay, it's interesting. It doesn't say she had a choice in the matter, but she was given away. And the imagination in this story would be that Samson knew about it or was okay with it. We're going to find out on chapter 15 that's not exactly the case. So if you would be ready to go into the Bible with me, we're going into Judges 15. After a while, in the time of wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat. So even though he was frustrated that she'd broken his heart, he was bringing her an offering, a young goat. And he said, "Let me go to my wife, into her room." So the idea is that he was planning to sleep with his wife, make a connection with her. But her father would not permit him to go in. So this might seem a little strange, but remember what just happened in the chapter before. He got very upset with his wife. She had lied to him, set out to have him beaten up and all kinds of stuff. Go back and read 15. But what I want you to see here is that her father really thought it was done. It was over. That relationship had ended. Her father said, "I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore, I gave her to your companion. Is not her youngest sister better than she? Please take her instead." So he knows that he doesn't want Samson mad, so he's like, "Here, have another one of my children," right? Just giving away the daughters like candy. And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them." So he didn't hurt her father even though he was really mad. But does he? Let's listen. Then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the fox's tail to tail, and put the torch between each pair of tails. When he set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines, and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. So yes, some degree, it's not Samson who hurts the Philistines by beating them up or causing any problem like that. But what he does, and they call them foxes, but most likely, since foxes were kind of solitary animals, especially in this area in that time, the thought is maybe they were jackals, which is an animal like that, but it doesn't really matter. What he's done is taken an animal with a tail, and he's taken that tail and lit it on fire. Never mind, animals were hurt in this story, yes, and they go into the fields, and what happens when a tail is on fire? It's going to go back and forth, the animal's going to try to get it off, and there's grain here, the grain's going to catch the fire, and up goes the grain yard. Now, this is the only time we really see this in the Bible, but it is common in that time to burn down an enemy's field. What does that mean? That means that the enemy has no food. If you are in the desert, taking out somebody's food or water is worse than even killing them, because that takes out an entire community. So what he's done, well, not exactly hurting anybody with physical force, he's actually taken away their ability to stay living. So then we go ahead a little bit. So, understandably, the Philistines are mad. On verse 6, it says, "Then the Philistines said, 'Who has done this?' And they answered, 'Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion.'" And this is where it gets really sad. "So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire." So while Samson did not hurt her her father with the fire, they did, as a way to seek revenge on their crops getting lost. Samson said to them, and I know that's a dark story, but I want you to see that story too, because we often just remember the Samson-Delilah relationship, but there was this story ahead of time that was almost even darker in some ways. All right, verse 7, Samson said to them, since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you. So now he's defending the revenge. This is hard, right? So he made a bet. His wife got him in trouble in the last verse, so he got mad at her. Now the father said, okay, I gave the wife away. He comes to visit the wife. She's not there. So then he gets mad at the father, burns down the crops. They get mad that the crops are burnt down. They burn down the father. See how this all works? And what is the lesson in this, friends? Revenge is not the answer. There is no end to it, right? It's this ongoing thing. That's what the Bible's telling us. A lot of the book of Judges is about cycles, or kind of ups and downs, or it's supposed to be teaching us a little bit about shapes of life, right? Shapes of relationships. We call things like the circle of life. We have the circle of Judges. People do good, then they go back, then they do good, and then they go back, and then they do good, and then they go back, and here we see the same thing. Revenge to one goes to the other. It's almost like there's no end to these kind of shapes that we see in Judges. All right, on verse 7, Samson said to them, since you would do a thing like this, remember he's going to get revenge now too. So he attacks them, and then we do see that a war breaks out. On verse 9, the Philistines are going to camp in Judah. They're going to deploy themselves. You're going to see by verse 11, now we're up to 3,000 men of Judah who are getting into this issue with Samson that all began with an issue at the marriage, at the wedding. Then we begin to say, as they have done to me, so I have done to them. But they say to him, we have come down to arrest you, and we may deliver you into the hands of the Philistines. So this is where Samson's going to get arrested. Now, it doesn't quite play out like they thought it would, because we're going to see on verse 14, when he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. So again, what ends this cycle of fire? It's the breaking of his bonds. So just like the flax or the wheat in the field is burned, we now have an ending with the wheat or the flax on his wrist being burned. So there's an end to that cycle. And what a new cycle begins is in the next verse. The new cycle is, his bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey. Now, this is a reference to, there's another Philistine in the Bible who's going to use an ox piece to get somebody. But what's funny about it is this jaw being, like a jawbone of a donkey, is probably only about, like, I don't know, I can't do this, 9 inches. Okay, so not a lot, right? So I want you to imagine something that intentionally in our Bible is written as comical. Here is a man who it says will grab a jawbone of a donkey. And so even think about your own jawbone, not very big, right? And he kills 1,000 men with it. It's made to make you go, whoa, and see that overwhelming strength of his, the strength that doesn't make any sense. Think of him in this image as like the Hulk or Superman. This is intentionally what the Bible wants you to say. They pick some very small piece to say, this is his weapon against all these literal 1,000 of men. That shows you how powerful his Nazirite vow was to him as far as strength goes. And we keep going. And so it was on verse 17 that he had finished speaking. He threw the jawbone from his hand and he like renames the place. And then he gets thirsty and there's that whole little scene. But I'm going to jump you on to 16 because I know that's what you're waiting for. In chapter 16, we meet a new person. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and that is a lady of the night, yep, and went into her. When the Gazarites were told, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate. They were quiet all night, saying, in the morning when it is daylight, we will kill him. And Samson lay low till midnight. When he arose at midnight, he took hold of the doors of the gates of the city, and the 2 gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill. Again, a comical story to show you how strong this man is. He has strength that is beyond imagine. That's what you are supposed to see in these stories. Because what's going to happen next is that strength is going to be taken away. Now, he now he begins to love a woman. He's into the next stage. We don't know how long this is. Maybe the next day, maybe down the road. But he's fallen in love now. And the woman's name is Delilah. Now, Delilah has the lords of the Philistines come to visit her. And the lords of the Philistines are going to say to her, find out the source of his strength. Because if they can't stop him from being super strong, they can't take him down. So Delilah begins to work with them. The Philistines come up to her and say to her we're in verse 4, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Anytime somebody offers you silver in the Bible, say no. It's never a good idea, right? So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies, and with what you may be bound to afflict you. Now that earlier story of Samson in that first